Hello friends, welcome back. Today we're doing our last front-end library certification front-end libraries project called Build a Pomodoro Clock. So we're going to mimic, they want us to do CodePen, but as you know, I don't use CodePen. I like to build our projects on GitHub pages using Git, and I walk us through how to publish them on my end at the end of the video. So we're going to do it on CodePen. Or we're not going to do it on CodePen, but this is what it's supposed to look like. So here I see you can press play, and you can make a break length or a session length. Looks like right now I can't do that, so it's more of a reset your session length. Okay, you can go down, increment down, make your break length to 1. If we increment down to 1, let's see what happens. Maybe there's going to be a sound in 50 seconds. We'll listen for it. But yeah, pretty much it looks pretty straightforward in terms of that. Yeah. We're not supposed to read the code, I don't think. You can use any mix of HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and Bootstrap. I think because of the simplicity of this, we're just going to use Bootstrap, CSS, and JavaScript and HTML. Bootstrap uses jQuery, so we'll use that as well. You should use a front-end framework like React, for example. I mean, Bootstrap is a front-end framework, so that's what we'll use. Because this section is about learning front-end frameworks. Additional technologies not listed above are not recommended, so we don't want to use Angular or Vue. We'll accept to try and fix all issues. They'll try to fix issues if they can. I can see an element with an ID of break level that contains a string break length. Okay, well, we can go through these user stories one at a time as we approach the project. Now this one has a huge amount, so I don't even know how long this video is going to require. Ah, there it is. Okay, and now it says started a break, and then my guess is it's going to start again. So I'm just going to refresh this and clear this out because I don't really want that going on in the background while I'm doing this. And so yeah, so we're going to start this off. I'm going to open a terminal window, not a terminal not notifier, but a terminal window. And so I'm going to change directories into the desktop. And so now I've only got 5 folders on my desktop. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a directory, and I'm going to call this one a free code camp Pomodoro clock. And then I'm going to change directories into there because now I've made a folder, and I'm going to change directories into the free code camp Pomodoro clock, and I can press tab to autofill that. And now if I list the file, it shows, well, I'm in an empty folder, and so there's nothing there, so I can just close that for now. I'm going to go touch index.html and open index.html. Okay. And so I'm going to open it with I'm going to select an application, and I'm going to make it Google Chrome, and so that'll pop up a window, but I'm doing this in a incognito window because I want it to look as clean as possible for you guys. So now we've got it open in the index, and now I'm going to open it with my text editor. I use Atom, but if you use something like VS Code or Sublime, that's 100% fine for our purposes here. And yeah, we'll see we've got the index. So we're going to just do a quick one and just write, paragraph. And in here we'll just write Pomodoro clock. And now if I save this file and refresh here, you'll see that we're playing with fire. Okay, and so we're going to use Bootstrap for this. Git Bootstrap, I think. Docs, yeah. We'll just go straight to the main website for now. And yeah, we're on version 4.5, so we can say get started. They give you an introduction. They tell you how to inject the CSS and the JS. But we should just start with their starter template, which is this guy here. And we can just pump it into here. Body HTML. Okay. And yeah, so instead of saying hello world, we can say useful programmer Pomodoro clock freecodecamp.org. And for some reason when I paste it in, it makes it look a little weird. And then I'm going to make this the title as well. Okay, so if I save this, I'm actually going to close it because it looks kind of wacky. But we can go Atom dot to open up Atom so that it shows our file structure here. And then if I reopen Atom, it's going to be clear. So this is the required meta tags. This is just helps to make sure that the mobile friendliness works. This is the Bootstrap CSS here. This is the title. I like to put the title at the top because I think that makes sense. And then we have an H1 element that doesn't really matter, but then we have our jQuery, our popper, and our CDN Bootstrap right here. And so for now, we can use all that. So cool. We save this, and if we come back over to this guy, we can see useful Pomodoro clock. We've got it working now. Okay, great. So let's get after the next part of this project. Is we're going to want to do test-driven development. So we're going to copy this JS testable projects JavaScript, and we're going to put it over here within the body tag. This is the important part, and it's good to put it at the bottom of the body tag. And we're just going to, we're really going to copy the way that these guys look. So we're going to go script, source, and then we're going to set the source equal to this guy. And then we want to make sure we do a closing script tag. Okay, so now we've got our Free Code Camp CDN testing framework in here. So if I save this and I come over here using Command 3, refresh the page, we'll see we now have a Pomodoro. We have the testing framework, and we can run the tests, and we'll see we're only passing 1 out of 29, which is perfectly fine because we just started. So yeah. And that's how we're going to do it. I'm going to iterate through here until all of our tests are passing, and then we're going to try to make the clock look a little bit cooler. And then, yeah, looks like we're going to add some audio as well, which will be fun. And so this is going to be a cool project. Let's get into it. I can see the element with an ID of break label that contains a string break length. So yeah, break length. Here we go. So I can see an element with an ID of break label that contains a string break length. Yeah, so I guess what we'll just do is let's make a div here. In Bootstrap, you go div class is equal to container, and then within your container, you've got a bunch of rows, and then within your rows, you have a bunch of columns. So div class is equal to column. And then that's where we're going to have maybe our header. And then you want to close these guys up too. So I'm just going to put this title up at the top for now, and then I'm going to close the container here as well. And now, so we've got our column here, and if we refresh this, you'll see that this guy, it looks a little bit, well, we can go text center to get this guy a little bit more centered. And then we could do padding on the top and the bottom of 5 to kind of give it some space so that when we run our tests, we don't have to have it overlaying it as badly. And so now we've got this initial heading, and we'll just leave that for now. And what we'll do is create another row. And then we'll go div class is equal to a column. And within the column, we'll create a div. Oh, we can just run the tests and use the tests. We can see an element with an ID of break label. And so here we're going to say ID is equal to break label. And within this div, they want it to contain a string that says break length. So we'll just say, I guess we'll say maybe H2, break length. Close the H2, close the label div, and close the column div. And now if we save this and refresh the page, we have a break length in the div. And I think if we run the test, we'll see we've got one passing. So this is great. We're already making some progress. So I can see an element with an ID of session label that contains a string of session length. Okay, so I don't know why that got done. We can just duplicate this column really and create another one. And then call this one, was it session length? Session label. Session label. And we're going to call this one session length. So now I can save that, refresh the page, and we've got break length and session length. And I think we can just go text center to these guys for now, because that'll make it so we're building a kind of comfortable area. So let's see, run the tests. Now we're passing 3. Great. There's another one behind us. I can see 2 clickable elements corresponding with the IDs, break decrement and session decrement. 2 clickable elements corresponding IDs. Okay, so I think that we want to have one maybe that says div ID break decrement. Oh no, it says that it wants clickable elements. So maybe we'll go add button, and then we'll close the button. And because this is Bootstrap, we're going to want to add a class to this. So class is equal to button. We'll go button primary, and we'll go button block, so it fills the page. So now if we were to refresh this, we'd see a button. But because there's no content in it, we need to add something. So let's add, less break. And now if we refresh the page, we'll see we'll have that. And it seems that we also want to do this for everything here, but just make it session, less session. Save that. We've got less session, less break. And let's run the tests. Cool. Looks like we're passing 4 tests now. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can see 2 clickable elements with the IDs of break increment and session increment. Okay, cool. Break decrement and break increment. Now, if you look at Bootstrap 4, if you look at the buttons, you can set them up like this. So we can say danger, success, and so we might as well make the danger ones decrement and the success ones increment. So we'll call this one success, and let's make them button outline for fun this time. Button outline success, outline primary, button outline. The decrement should go below the increment button, right? And the success should go on top. Break, increment. Okay, cool. And we want to say more break. And so here we'll do the same thing. It looks like I'm going to get rid of that empty space. We want to call this one session increment, and we'll do this one as success as well, and then more session. Cool. And now if I save this and I come over to our page, we've got less break, more break, more break, less break, more session, less session. And if I run the test, it looks like we're passing 1 more test. So here we say I can see an element with a corresponding ID of break length, which by default onloads display a value of 5. Okay. Break length. Well, I guess we want to just put that between these guys. So let me see that again. It says it wants a corresponding ID. I can see an element with a corresponding by which the onload displays a value of 5. Cool. So we could just go div with an ID equal to break length, and just set it to 5 to start off with. If I save that, I wonder if I refresh the page, the break length is 5. But let's make this an H1 element, so it's just large. And we'll make it a class is equal to text primary. If I refresh the page, now it's kind of bigger with 5. And we might change this later, but for now I'll just keep it like that. LENGTH. Cool. And then let's do the same thing. I'm just assuming that the next thing is going to be for us to have a session. Instead of a break length, a session length. And break length, and it should have a value of 25. Now, obviously, this is going to have to change, but if we refresh the page, we've got session length and break length. And we should make this one, instead of primary, we just make this one success. So we've got green over here and blue over here. And if we run the test, we're up to 7 passing. Okay, so I can see an element with a corresponding ID of timer label that contains a string indicating a session is initialized. And so when we look over here, that is right in the middle. And so that's pretty cool. Maybe we should kind of keep that going. So instead of adding another column in here, we can just add another row with the text centered. And yeah, and then we'll be able to add we could go div class as column. And within here, we're going to create an ID with timer. So div ID timer, time label. And it must contain a string indicating the session is initialized. With indicating a session is an initialized session. Okay, well, we could go session. Well, I wonder if that's what it means by when it says initialized. So come back over here and we'll see if we can pass test unit 7. Okay, a time label that contains a string indicating the session is initialized. Now we're probably going to have to change all of this with JavaScript later, but right now we're just getting our HTML like bones set up. And so with this row, I'm going to create some space. So I'm going to say py of 4, which will give us some space here. And you know, honestly, I can make this within a card. It's equal to card. If you look at the Bootstrap, you can do cards. So cards look like this, and you can go card, and then a card body, and then the title, right? And so actually, let's just grab this and put it right here. We can get rid of the image. We don't need the card anymore because we've got it here. But we do want to add this guy into here. And so we could do the session could actually be added right here to the card title. So what this is going to do is put us in there. And we could do just something here later, and then a button at the bottom, something here later. Cool. So now if I come back over to my project, refresh the page, we've got a pretty cool looking thing. Yeah, I wonder if we get rid of this inline styling, what will that do to the card? Cool, it makes it kind of big and spread out. I like this for now. Card body, card title. Cool. If we could just say session initialize. And that gives us some stuff to work with. So let's go back to the tests, run the tests, and see where we should step next. So we've got the timer label that contains a string indicating the session is initialized, and I can see an element with a corresponding ID of time left. Note, paused or running, the value in this field should always be displayed in minute, second format. Okay, time left. So I think we could do that here. We could create a div with an ID equal to time left. And for here, we'll initialize it with 2500. And I think that might get us past this format. So let's refresh the page. We'll see we've got it here. If I were to inspect the element here, you'll see that that's a time left element. So we could do document.get element by ID and then time left, and that would give us that guy right there. Cool. So let's run the tests. Looks like it passed. We're into the yellow now. pausing or running the value in the field should always display a minute form. Time left is not formatted correctly. Expect 25 to equal 60. Time left is not formatted. Expect 25 to equal 60. Okay, so we change this to 60, refresh the page, run the tests, and we still have that expected 60 to equal 25. It's not formatted correctly. All right, well, let's move on beyond this, because I think that this might be having problems because of something that we'll run into further down the tests. So here I can see a clickable element with a corresponding ID of start and stop. Well, we already have a clickable element down here, so let's go keep it with the outline look, which we're doing with everything else, and we can make the ID equal to start stop. And now if I save this, we can make this start stop. If I refresh the page over here, now we'll be looking for to see if we're passing element 9. Run the test. Looks like we've got some more passing. Nice. Well, we're still failing 8, but 9 is starting to work. So I can see a clickable element with the corresponding ID of reset. Okay, cool. Well, let's just do this one again, and instead of primary, we'll say danger, and we'll call it reset. And if I save that and come over here, refresh the page, we've got start, stop, and reset. And so if we run the test, we're up to 11. Awesome. The corresponding ID equal to reset. I can see a clickable element. Well, I can see it. Oh, we need to make the ID reset. Cool. So if I save that and refresh the page, run the tests, here we go. I can see a clickable element with the corresponding element of reset. So now that we're on to these timer ones, the tests are going to start taking us a lot longer. But yeah, I think you can kind of see what's going on here. Essentially, we have a structure for a Pomodoro clock in which nothing works, but we kind of have the bones together. You know, the break length, we've got the break length here and the session length. Here we've got that. There's their play pause button and their reset button. And yeah, I guess the title's there as well. So, I mean, in terms of the HTML, we've sort of got this project put together pretty well. One thing I'd like to do is put this into a row. And then within the row, we'll do div class is equal to column. And then we'll have this button and make it a block button. And then we can close that div, create another row. And then this way the buttons will fill the space. And if we save this and refresh the page, we'll have quite big ones. But we want to make sure we make the reset button block as well. And so now, yeah, I think it's cool. If this were mobile friendly, in the mobile clock, this works out pretty well as well. Obviously the buttons don't work right now, but I think it's pretty cool. It's a pretty nice start, and that's one of the things I like about Bootstrap is it makes it pretty easy to thumb things out. So yeah, my guess is now we're going to get into some more challenging JavaScript stuff. The timer things are starting to take a while to load. Time left is not formatted correctly, but what I'm seeing here is that this changed when I changed it. I mean, they expected 60 to equal 25, and before they expected 25 to equal 60. So my guess is that we're going to address this in a future JavaScript-related thing. So here it says, when I click the element with the ID of reset, any running timer should be stopped. The value within ID break length should return to 5, and the value within the session length should return to 25. The element with the ID of time left should reset to its default state. Okay, well, we should just start with what we can affect. So when I click the element with the ID of break decrement, the value within the ID of break length decrements by a value of 1, and I can see the updated value. Okay, this looks like something we can do with vanilla JavaScript quite easily. So break decrement, if I go find Command F, break decrement, we see it's right here. Yeah, this is the one if we look here, more break, less break. So break decrement is this less break one. So when we click here, this 5 goes down. So the 5 is the element here. Break length is right here. Okay, cool. So for this one, yes, last project, I put most of our JavaScript. I went like this, and we put all of our JavaScript in here. And that caused us to have this huge file, right? And so this time I think that we're going to skip that, and we're just going to go immediately to referencing it from the source. So the source is equal to, and we're going to make a folder called JS, and we're going to call this Pomodoro brain. So this is going to be the brain of the Pomodoro. So if I go command and then the / key, in here, I can right click and press Shift A, and then I can make a folder called JS. So we're already referencing the JS, and so now we just want to make a file named Pomodoro brain and put it into this folder. So I'm going to press A, and I'm going to say Pomodoro brain.js. And then just to test to make sure that we're referencing it properly, I'm just going to console.log and say how Pomodoro brain loaded. Okay, so now if I save this and refresh this page, if I inspect the element in the console, we see Pomodoro brain loaded, and so therefore we are working. So the first thing that we should do is gain access to this guy, right? So if I inspect this element, we have a div called break length, and we want to be able to increment that. So if I go document.get element by ID, and we go break, what was it? Break length? No, what the code, the one that we're trying to pass is this timer one. Break decrement. Oh no, we want to do break length, length. Right, okay, cool. So now if I call the break length, we see we're calling it here, and then in there we have an h1 element. So yeah, if we can set this to a variable, right? So let break length equal this guy, and then if we go break length dot inner HTML, it gets us that. We could set it equal to 6. Right, and so then it changes. We lost the add node, so we want to actually create a node. So how do we do that with vanilla HTML? Add h2 node HTML. JavaScript. Create text node. Cool. So document create text node. Hello world. We create the element, we make it an H element, and then we create the text node, and we append the child. So let's just add this over to our console, and well, we want to make this an H2, make H1, and so let's just start by adding an H. Okay, so H is an H1 element. And then I think we can go add class. And we add a class of, here we have text primary. Okay. JavaScript, add class. Class list.add, there we go. So not add class, but class list.add text primary. So H is now a text primary element, and h.innerText is equal to, let's say, well, let's just, if we call h.innerText, ooh, no. Oh, but it's not the H. Now what we're looking for is break length. So break length dot inner text, it's 6, and so we can go break length dot inner text is equal to break length dot inner text plus 1. And so now here we have 6, and when we call this, oh, okay, so we made a mistake there. It's just adding 1 as a string onto there. So instead we have to go parse float break length dot inner text plus 1. So now we're incrementing it up. So break length. Okay, so break length, this is the way we increment. And we need to make sure that we call break length, we define it like this. Break length. And then break length dot inner text. This is how we increment it. So right now I'm going to refresh, and we have 5 here. And then if I call this in the console, this will be how we can decrement or increment the element. So there it was 6. Was it 6 before? Refresh. We had it at 5. Okay, cool. And so now when we click it, now the computer is aware of the break length, and then we can increment that value. So it's going to go from 5 to 6. Okay, cool. But we still want to make it that H2 element. But actually, you know what? We don't need to make it the H2 element. So here, instead of making it a 5 like this, I'm just going to make it 5 to start off with here. And we'll just use CSS to make it work. So again, now if we were to run this, we increment it by 1. Okay, cool. So that's the function that we want to do. We want to call these 2 bits of code when we decrement the length, correct? We run the tests. It's right down here. Expected 6 to equal 1. When I click the element break decrement, so when I click break decrement, we want to say on click, we want to do decrement break. And I just made up this function here. And I think we should pass in a value. No, let's just make it 1 by default. Okay, sweet. So now we've defined this function. Now we need to actually give it a life here. So a function decrement break. And then within the function, we're going to do this guy. So now if I save this and I refresh this page and we say less break, well, we're adding to it. So we want to subtract from it. So if I save that and I refresh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool. So let's see what happens if we run the tests now. And these tests take a while because there's a timer involved. When I call the element with the ID of break decrement, the value within break length decrements by 1, and I can see the updated value. Expected 63 to equal 1. Click the element with the ID of break decrement. This is the ID with break decrement. We decrement the break. Now, I'm starting to think that the reason that this is failing is because of some other test affecting the outcomes of the test. Because you can see that the consoles are going crazy, and that's probably causing this decrement situation to happen. Expected -95. Maybe it's happening too quickly for them. So, yeah, I'm not really sure where we should go with this. But for now, we're actually decrementing the break. We know that we want... At the end game, we want this guy. This is their increment, this is their decrement, this is their session length, and this is their session length. We want to be able to increment those just by clicking there. And so we can just kind of intuit what these guys are going to actually be required to do. So we can get rid of this console log now. And I would say we can do increment break here. And so the break length, make this one 1, and then session here, increment session and decrement session, and then our session length, and here we'll have our session length as well. And actually, the more I think about it, we don't need this here. We should just get these variables. We're going to reuse them a lot. So we can put them outside of the scope, and that's going to work out perfectly fine for us because that's going to allow us to not have to repeat ourselves. So break length. But here we want to make this session length. And with the sessions, we're going to want to do that as well. Session length. Okay, so now if I save this guy and refresh over here, weird, it's only working there. So perhaps we have to keep these in the session for now. Let's see if that works for the session. Okay, it's not working at all. Break length. Oh, you know what? That needed to be session length. Well, our variables session length. Uncaught. It was not defined product. Length. This is our break length. Okay, so let's just put these back in their functions where they belong and see if that gets us working. Refresh. Okay, decrement's working, increment's not. This one's not, and that one's not. So I think we can go back over to here and, oh yes. Decrement length. We're not, the buttons haven't been hooked up. The buttons actually have to have their on click handlers. So instead of saying break increment, we want to say increment break here. And here, instead of saying decrement break, we want to say decrement session. And here we're going to say on click is equal to increment session. Okay. So now if I save that and refresh, it's not working on the session, but we're working both sides on the break, which is interesting. So let's see. Session length. It's not working in our session. So session length. Well, one thing is our session length, we haven't gotten rid of this H1 system. So maybe if we do it like that, that'll change. Okay, so that did not make it change. It said break length is not defined. Increment session, decrement session. Break length is not defined. So, here we've got break length. We need to make this session length. So we refresh the page, 26. Unexpected token. Looks like I made a mistake here. Decrement session. Unexpected token on line 42. Let's go back over to here. Line 42. Decrement session. Oh, we got to get rid of that guy. Cool. So now we refresh 26, 25, 24. Okay. And yeah, all right. So now we have that. Let's see if that changes the way our tests are looking. Doesn't look like it's changed much in terms of the just tests working, though we know we're a little bit closer. Break length, which has a onload displays a value of 5. Value of 5 is not displayed. I think this just means we need to refresh the page and run the tests. Okay, so that solved that one. So now we're back to 8. So I can see an element with a corresponding ID equal to time left. I can see an L with an ID to time left. Did we do that? Okay, time left. Expected 60 to equal 25. Paused or running, the value of this field should always be displayed in minutes, seconds format. i.e. 2500. I'm going to put this back to 2500. Left time is not formatted correctly. Expected 60 to equal 25. And I think that this has to do with the clock, perhaps. When I click the element with the ID of break decrement, the value with the ID break length decrements by 1, and I can see the updated value. Expected negative 59 to equal 1. When I click the element with the ID of break increment, the value within the ID break length increments by a value 1, and I can see the updated value. When I click the element with the ID of session decrement, the value session length decrements by a value of 1, and I can see the updated value. So expected negative 39. My code is getting negative 39, and they're expecting 21. So maybe they're clicking it 3 times. For some reason, it's happening really quickly. Session length. Okay, so I'm going to redo this. I want these variables to be out because I think maybe redefining them is causing a problem. And I think that I didn't have it right initially, but now it should work. So the break length and the session length, I'm going to put them together. Session length, break length. So now I'm going to save this, refresh the page. They're not working. Okay, instead of putting them together like that, I'm going to put them up here. And then we need to do, I think it's called document.onload. We're going to do something called init. And then we're going to create a function of init. And then within here, we're going to define these variables because they need to be defined on the document's load, and that way our functions can run. Oh yeah, I get you the function saying that they can't, they're not being defined. Break. I wonder if I did this like ES6 wise. Window, let me see, window.document.onload. Window.document.onload. Refresh the page. Still not figuring these variables out. Well, when I put them in here, they do work, so. And then if I do the break length, refresh, 6, 3, 2, 1. I mean, this is totally working. It's just not passing the tests. So that's frustrating. What about console.log, document, loaded? If I refresh the page, does this even happen? Okay, that doesn't happen. Window.onload. Document loaded. So now I should be able to do this. Comment this out, run this guy up here again. If they're being defined, we should be able to see it. Document loaded. Break session. Break length. It's not being learned. Okay. Anyways, document loaded. I don't even think we need this now. All right, so this is working. So break length and adding to the session and reducing the session is working. So let's try to move on from here. So break length, session length. We notice that the session length, when we increment or decrement this, we actually increment and decrement the values in there as well. So let's focus on that for now. So right now, when I say more session, the session initialized does not improve or it doesn't increment the way that we want it to. So let's think about how to do that. Okay, so on our index, we have session initialized, And we have the time left. And so I think we can add div ID is equal to minutes. And then here we can do seconds. Okay, and now if we refresh the page, maybe instead of div we can use span so they won't break the lines. Okay, cool. So their spans work. And so what we can do, if we have the span, we can call into the console now and try to get that access to that. So document get element by ID minutes. That's that one. So minutes dot inner text is equal to if we go inner text, I think it'll get us 25. So is equal to, say we want to decrement that, we can say minutes dot inner text. We can say parse int, and then throw this guy at the end. And we'll say we want to decrement it. We would do that. Okay, cool. Or we could just make it equal to the decremented number here. So yeah, let's do that. We can copy this. Decrement session. The session is the one that we want to do it to. So here we'll have dot inner text. Well, we should do that down here. And we want to make this equal to the decremented value. So we'll say let decremented session value equal that guy. And then we'll just throw the decremented session value into both of these guys. So now when we refresh the page, we should, when we subtract from here, we also subtract from here. And we're going to want to do the same thing for the increment as well. So we'll say let incremented session value equal this guy. And then we'll have our incremented session value here. And we'll do the exact same thing here, is equal to incremented session value. So now when I save that, refresh the page, we see that the session length and the more and the less session work together, I don't know, perfectly. Is that the way you would think about it? So we run the test, and we'll see if anything passes. I'm really not super into these tests because I'm doing exactly what they say and then we're not passing them. So that's very strange to me. It should have a default value of 25. Well, if I refresh the page, it has a default value of 25. But if I run the tests, it doesn't have a default value of 25 because I've actually already clicked this. So it's falsely failing on this one. But now look at this. We've got I can see the element corresponding with time left paused or running in minutes second time. So for some reason we're passing that test now. But it has to do with just getting that part to work. So when I click the element with the ID of reset, any timer should be stopped. The value within ID equals break length should return to 5. And the value within the ID session should return to 25. And the element with the ID time left should reset to its default state. Okay, so when I click the element break decrement the value, for some reason it's really not understanding that this is actually working. Apparently I'm running it down to -55 when I do that. Okay, I should not be able to set a session break length to less than 0. Okay, so a break length. So here we've got break length, the inner text. So if break length inner text is greater than, and we need to parse that, right? So anyways, here, here's how I look at this just to make it sort of clear. Console.log, and if we decrement our break and our break length inner text, well, we can just point that out to ourselves in the console. So I'm going to refresh the page, look in the console, less break length is not working. Yeah, we need to console log it after we define the variable. The variable needs to be defined. So less break 543. So if we do type of right now, we'll see that this is a string. Type of break length. If we refresh this and see that, we're getting a string, so we need to make this parse int. So parse float. And now if I refresh the page, you'll see that we're dealing with a we're dealing with a number. And with a number, we can make conditional statements. So we can say if parse float is greater than, so if the number is greater than 0, then we can decrement. And if it's not, we're just not going to do anything. So let's refresh the page. I can get rid of this now. Decrement break. This is for the break, so we'll still have to deal with break, but appears that we have a error. Is greater than 0. Parse float break length text. This guy, we need to get this as the number that comes out, and as long as that's greater than 0, we could say greater than or equal to, because we can set it to 0 for the break. 4321. It's greater than 0. We don't want it to go -1, so less break. Cool. More break. Cool. Man, it's a bummer that these tests aren't actually showing that they're passing. Maybe I got some free ones there. Break length, which is default to 5. Ignore that. That'll be fixed as when we refresh the page. I should not be able to set the break length to greater than 60. When I click the ID start stop, the timer should begin running. Oh, that's funny that that's passed. Interesting. Okay, so I'm just going to keep trying to get these ones where I can. Increments by value 1, and I can see the updated value. Expected 0 equal to 29. I should not be able to set the session break length to less than or equal to 0. Okay, so we can't set the break length less than 0. I should not set the session or break length to greater than 60. Okay, so we want to make sure also that we can't set it so that it is greater than. We only want to. Well, we don't need to worry about that here because you can't decrement past it. So we want to be able to say break length dot inner text is less than or equal to 60. Then we can, as long as it's less than or equal to 60, we can increment. So more break. This is going to take a while. $61. Okay, so we don't want to make it equal to. All right. And I'm pretty sure we're going to want the same thing for the sessions. Reset so we get a clean reading. Run tests. We've got all of the content working. And the timer. When I click the ID break decrement, the value break length decrements by value 1, and I can see the updated value. Don't know why that's not working. Within the value of break length. When I click the element with the ID of break increment, the value of break length increases by a value of 1. And I can see the updated value. Okay, that one's passing. even though the tests don't show it. When I click the element with the ID of session decrement, the value session length decrements by 1, and I can see the updated value. We've got that working. When I click the element with the ID of session increment, the value ID session length, session increment session length, session length. When I click session increment, session length, let increment session value. Oh, when I click the session increment, ID session increment, maybe it needs to say session increment on it. No, it's with the ID. I'm going to put that back. Maybe later I'll test it. The value of session length increments by a value of 1, and I can see the updated value. That's happening. I should not be able to set the session or break length over 60. Okay. So we actually need to add this in here too. Increment session value. Yeah. If the session length is greater than 60, then we want to do this. If it's less than 60. When it's 60, we won't let it keep going. And you should not be able to set the session or break length. You should not be able to set the session or break length less than that. So, same thing with this guy. And we want to do it this way. But instead of break length, we want to say session length. Cool. Minutes. Session length.intertext. Refresh the page. This should not be able to go above 60. And the length should not be able to go above 60. The break length should not be able to go above 60. Cool. And then both of them should both not be able to go below 0. Good. All right. So yeah, I mean, it seems to me that those tests are passing, but they don't seem to be passing in terms of the testing framework. Now, a lot of times what I would do if I were writing professional software like this, I would either figure out why the tests are breaking and adjust the tests, because this is obviously, it's working. So I'm not going to worry about it for now. When I first click the element start stop, the timer should begin running from the value currently displayed in the ID session length, even if the value has been incremented or decremented from its original value of 25. Okay, well, the timer's not starting from there, and yet it's passing the test. So that tells us 8's kind of weird, but I'm going to leave it for now. If the timer is running, the element with the ID of time left should display the remaining time in minute second format, decrementing the value of 1 and updating the display every 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, so we're going to have to write the timer soon. If the timer is running and I click the element with the ID start stop, the countdown should pause. If the timer pauses and I click start top, the countdown should resume. And when a session countdown reaches 0, the timer must reach 0. A new countdown begins. Where the timer label should display a string indicating a break has begun. Okay. And so, yeah, we're going to have to deal with all that later. So right now we want to deal with setting up the clock. So we want to be able to say when we start, let's refresh so we have a 25-minute session. We want to be able to say when we start, we want to see this guy start to decrement. And so right now it's not doing anything. So let's go back over to the function and see where to start. Okay, so it's going to be this guy, right? We can pretty much remove this href because we'll probably do an on-click thing rather than a link. I'm going to save that, refresh. Actually, let's leave those in there because it looks pretty cool, and I don't think it affects the functionality. So yeah, we want to create some sort of a function here. We're going to do an on-click again, and we're going to set it up like that. So start click, on click, we want to say toggle on off. And then in our Pomodoro brain, we're going to say function toggle on off. Cool. And so console.log, just so we can see what we're working with, toggle on off clicked. Just to make sure we're working with fire here. And then we'll head back over to here. And we're going to say, this is our reset. So we can just say, this one's going to say reset clock. We should say toggle clock on off. Reset clock. Cool. So toggle clock on. Actually, I think it should be on or off. Toggle clock on or off. And then this one is going to be reset clock. Function reset clock. And here we're going to console.log reset clock should get reset to default now. Cool. So now if I save that and I save this and we go over here, refresh the thing, look in the console, this will be able to tell us whether everything's wired up properly. And all we have to do is work on the functionality of it. Cool. So here we've got the clock should get turned on or off. And here we're going to reset the clock. And that's going to be the end of part 1 for this one. This is a big one. The testing framework's a little bit frustrating, but I think we're going to be able to get through it and at least have something that works for the purposes of the test. But yeah, I think this is a pretty cool looking start to it. We can increment, we can decrement, and we've got our buttons wired up so that they're operating with our JavaScript, but they're not actually running a clock downward. So in the next video, we'll start with the clock, and then we'll make sure everything else is working. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next project.